Everyone assumes narcissists feel nothing after breaking someone. What almost no one realizes is that something does linger. Not guilt, not remorse, not the kind of regret most people would recognize. Something colder, more calculated, and far more revealing about how they actually see the people they destroy. There is a specific kind of loss that the narcissist experiences after the destruction of a relationship, one that surfaces not in the immediate aftermath, not in the dramatic endings and the performative moving on, but later, quietly, often in the specific context of a new relationship that is failing to produce what the previous one provided, or in an unguarded moment, when the noise of new supply temporarily reduces and something uncomfortably specific fills the space it leaves behind. It is not grief. It is not the ordinary human experience of missing a person whose presence made life richer. What most people don't realize is that the narcissist's version of regret has almost nothing to do with who the person was, and almost everything to do with what they provided. And more specifically, how precisely they had been configured to provide it. This is the loss of a calibrated mirror, and it is more significant to the narcissist's internal experience than any emotional attachment could ever be. The person who was broken wasn't simply a partner or a friend or a family member in the narcissist's internal accounting. They were a supply system that had been refined over time through conditioning, through the gradual erosion of boundaries, through the systematic replacement of the target's own self-trust, with dependency on the narcissist's version of reality, into something that functioned with remarkable efficiency. They knew exactly how to respond. They had learned, through experience, which reactions the narcissist required and how to produce them. The conditioning was complete. Pay attention to what this means for the narcissist when the relationship ends. They haven't lost a person. They have lost the output of a process that took significant time and effort to produce. This is where the efficiency regret surfaces, and it is perhaps the most revealing form of regret the narcissist carries, precisely because it exposes what the relationship actually was from their side of it. Not connection, not love, not even conscious exploitation in the way most people imagine it. A system optimized and now gone. There is a particular discomfort that the narcissist carries after breaking someone that is almost never discussed because it doesn't fit the narrative of the narcissist as someone entirely unbothered by the people they leave behind. It is quieter than guilt and colder than remorse, but it is persistent in a way that most other post-relationship experiences are not. The person they broke is still out there, and they know things. What most people don't realize is that the narcissist's anxiety about the witness they created has nothing to do with conscience. It is entirely reputational. The person who was broken was also the person who had the most unobstructed view of who the narcissist actually is. Not the curated version presented to new audiences, not the carefully managed persona deployed in social and professional environments, but the unfiltered, unperforming, privately revealed version that only emerges in the sustained intimacy of a close relationship that witness. Now, unsupervised and no longer under the narcissist's narrative control, represents something that cannot be managed from a distance. Pay attention to what this reveals about the narcissist's behavior toward people they've discarded. The monitoring, the occasional reappearances, the subtle attempts to maintain some form of connection or influence. These are rarely about missing the person. They are about managing the witness. Then comes the comparison trap. New supply arrives, gets idealized, and almost immediately begins being measured, unconsciously, continuously, against the one who was broken. Not because the narcissist values what was lost emotionally, but because the specific combination of responsiveness, tolerance, and conditioned behavior that the previous target provided proves surprisingly difficult to locate elsewhere in the same configuration. Most people miss this warning sign entirely. They assume they were easily replaced. The hidden reason the comparison persists suggests otherwise. There is an anxiety that runs beneath the narcissist's post, relationship behavior that rarely gets identified for what it actually is, because its surface presentation looks like indifference, like the confident forward momentum of someone who has moved on completely and feels no pull toward what was left behind. But beneath that surface, something specific is operating. The uncontrolled narrative problem never fully resolves. The narcissist, who managed the story of the relationship with considerable precision, while inside it, controlling what was disclosed to mutual contacts, shaping how conflicts were interpreted, maintaining a version of events that consistently positioned them favorably, now faces a situation where that story is being told by someone they can no longer manage. What most people don't realize is that this doesn't produce guilt in the narcissist. It produces vigilance, a quiet, persistent monitoring of what the broken person might be saying, to whom, and with what level of detail. Not because the narcissist fears accountability in any genuine sense. Accountability requires a self-concept that includes the possibility of being wrong, but because an accurate account of their behavior, circulating in social or professional spaces they still occupy, represents a threat to the image management that is always their primary operational concern. Pay attention to the specific behaviors this anxiety produces, the occasional friendly reaching out that seems to have no clear purpose, the monitoring of the former target's social presence, the cultivation of mutual contacts who might serve as intelligence sources. None of these are about missing the person. They are about maintaining some degree of surveillance over a narrative that escaped their control. Then comes something that arrives more slowly, the supply quality recognition. In the months following the discard, as new relationships fail to immediately produce the same depth and consistency of supply, the narcissist begins developing a specific and calculating awareness. The hidden reason this awareness never becomes genuine remorse reveals everything about how the narcissist processes loss. It surfaces not as an emotional experience, but as an assessment, a quiet recalibration of the previous target's value, conducted not in terms of who they were as a person, but in terms of what they reliably provided and how difficult that specific provision is proving to replicate. This is exactly what they want you to believe was love. When it resurfaces as longing, it is inventory. There is a pattern that narcissists encounter in every new relationship that follows the destruction of a previous one. A pattern so consistent, so predictably timed, and so specifically located in the transition from idealization to the work of actual sustained connection, that it functions almost like a clock. The new person stops being new, and what replaces the novelty reveals the problem. What most people don't realize is that the intensity of the narcissist's idealization phase serves a dual function. It creates attachment in the new target, yes, but it also creates, temporarily, a supply environment so rich in fresh attention and new emotional reactions that it masks a deficit the narcissist won't become aware of until the intensity naturally fades. The new person hasn't been conditioned, they haven't learned yet which responses the narcissist requires, how to manage the moods, how to absorb the blame without shutting down entirely. The previous target had developed all of these calibrations across months or years of sustained exposure. The new person is starting from the beginning. And the narcissist's impatience, their intolerance of the learning curve, means that this phase of every new relationship produces a specific and recurring frustration. This is where the replacement inadequacy generates its most significant internal pressure. Pay attention to what happens next, because the permanent shock arrives at precisely the moment the narcissist might have expected to fall back on the previous supply source as a stabilizing resource. The person who was broken has genuinely moved on, not as a performance, not as a strategy, but completely, visibly, and without apparent interest in what the narcissist is currently experiencing. Most people never realize what this specific combination, replacement inadequacy meeting permanent loss, actually produces in the narcissist's internal world. It produces the one experience their entire behavioral architecture was built to prevent: the uncomfortable, unavoidable awareness that what they discarded was not as replaceable as discarding it implied. There is a layer beneath the operational regret, beneath the efficiency loss and the narrative anxiety, and the replacement inadequacy that sits deeper than any of these things and is encountered far less frequently, because reaching it requires a reduction in external noise that the narcissist lifestyle is specifically organized to prevent. It is the reflected inadequacy. And it arrives, when it arrives at all, not as a conscious thought, but as a feeling, unidentified, uncomfortable, and quickly buried beneath whatever supply source is most immediately available. What most people don't realize is that the person the narcissist broke was often in observable and measurable ways more capable of genuine connection than the narcissists themselves will ever be, more empathetic, more willing to be vulnerable, more able to sustain care for another person without calculating its return value. And somewhere beneath the defensive superiority, beneath the continuous performance of confidence and indifference, this awareness exists, not articulated, not acknowledged, but present as a low-frequency discomfort. That specific moments bring uncomfortably close to the surface. Pay attention to what triggers these moments, because they follow a recognizable pattern: failed new relationships, quiet evenings without adequate distraction, unexpected reminders of specific moments from the previous relationship that surface without invitation and resist the usual narrative revision. This is where the pattern recognition moment becomes the most psychologically significant experience in the entire post-relationship sequence. In rare instances of reduced stimulation, the narcissist briefly glimpses something they spend enormous energy avoiding: the repeating structure of their own behavior across multiple relationships, multiple people, multiple cycles of idealization and destruction. Most people never realize that this glimpse exists, because the narcissist's next move, executed with practiced automaticity, is to bury it immediately beneath new supply, new activity, new noise. The hidden reason they move so quickly after every ending is not confidence. It is the speed required to stay ahead of what stillness would reveal. When you examine the full architecture of what the narcissist carries after breaking someone, the loss of a calibrated supply system, the efficiency regret that has nothing to do with emotion, the witness anxiety that drives covert monitoring, the comparison trap that measures every new person against the one who was conditioned, the uncontrolled narrative that cannot be managed from a distance, the supply quality recognition that arrives too late to change anything, the replacement inadequacy that surfaces in every subsequent relationship's transition out of idealization, the permanent shock of discovering that genuine healing removed the option to return, the reflected inadequacy that exists beneath layers of defensive performance, and the pattern recognition moment that stillness occasionally forces and busyness immediately buries. What emerges is something that the word regret barely contains. It is the accumulated consequence of a personality structure that converts people into systems, relationships into supply arrangements, and connection into a resource to be extracted rather than an experience to be shared. And the specific nature of what is regretted reveals, with more clarity than any confrontation ever could, what the relationship actually was from the narcissist side of it. Not a connection that was broken, a system that was lost. What most people don't realize is that this distinction between regretting a person and regretting a resource is the most honest thing the narcissist will never say out loud. It would require acknowledging something about themselves, that the entire behavioral architecture was constructed to keep permanently out of conscious view, that they were never actually in the relationship the other person thought they were in. Pay attention to the behavior rather than the performance of feeling. Because the secret regret the narcissist carries was never about you as a person. It was about what you provided, how well you provided it, and how long it took to find someone they could break in exactly the same way.